If you wonder how portraits like these are created, then in this video I'm going to explain some of the key tips that you need to know. I'm going to explain the things that most portrait photographers simply overlook, which is why they end up taking the same pictures as everybody else. So if you want to take pictures that stand out, then stay tuned. When it comes to lighting, most people only know one lighting setup. They know the Rembrandt style of lighting. There's nothing wrong with Rembrandt lighting. In fact, it's actually a really good lighting technique. Now, if you've ever wondered how people get their photos to look more painterly like this, then the lighting technique that I'd like to introduce to you is called broad lighting. And what broad lighting is when we have the model or subject's face closest to the camera being illuminated, while the shadow side falls on the side furthest from the camera. Whilst this does make the face appear a little bit wider, it's actually a more softer, romantic and feminine look. So now I'm going to explain how to light this. In this picture you'll notice that my model's face is turned to camera left. Let's look at the diagram that represents this positioning. And I'll draw a line indicating the direction the model's nose is pointing. To achieve broad lighting, we need to position the light somewhere between this line and up to around 45 degrees on the right hand side of the camera. This means the light is roughly in front of the model, which creates a softer and more painterly look. Now what if our model turns more to the side? Well, the same principle applies. Looking at the diagram again, I'll mark the new direction where her nose is pointing. As long as the light is positioned on the camera side of her nose, anywhere within this range, and we'll get broad lighting. This works because the light remains on the same side of her face as the camera, ensuring that the well-lit side is visible to the viewer. Now let's talk about creating a dramatic look using short lighting. Short lighting is excellent for adding depth and drama by emphasizing shadows. I often associate this look with evening or nighttime scenes and style the shoot accordingly. Here's how to light for short lighting. Again, we start by noting the model's direction. On the diagram, I'll mark the line representing where her nose is pointing. This time, the light needs to be placed on the opposite side of that line, away from the camera. By lighting the side of the face turned away from the camera, we leave the side facing the camera in shadow. This contrast is what gives us a dramatic, shadow-heavy effect of short lighting. Of course, remember to use a softbox or some sort of lighting modifier to achieve these looks. Almost all of the photos in this video that were taken in the studio are lit with a 3x2 foot Bowen softbox, and a softbox will help to diffuse the light, creating a softer and more flattering effect, which is essential for both broad and short lighting styles. The next concept I want to introduce to you is framing positions, and by this I mean we're shooting a headshot, a half length, a full length, sitting down. What works best? Now, there's two framing positions which are much more popular than any of the others, and I'm going to share them with you now. The first one is the half-length portrait. I found in my testing, and when I was speaking to other portrait photographers as well, because we're doing a half-length, we can see the arms more, so we're seeing the rotation in the body, we're seeing the person's shape, we're seeing more of them, but we're seeing the head large enough in the shot that we feel like we can relate to it. And this works really well because it's one of the ways that we interact with people normally. When we stand and have a conversation with someone, what we do is we're really aware of their top half and not so aware of the bottom half because of the distance that we are away from them. If you frame your portraits as top half portraits, you will get much better interactions from your audience. The second framing position that is massively effective is the seated portrait. Seated portraits are again another position that we're used to talking to people in, but in a seated portrait, we can get a little bit crazy and do different things. Body language becomes a really important part of a seated portrait. It's why people engage with it so strongly. So this excels over the full-length portrait because when someone's full length, and when people are standing and we're taking a picture of them full length, we're much more drawn to the clothing. So that suits fashion much better, but not so much for portraits where we want to see more of expression and body language from the person. The third tip I have for you is about expression. Again, this is really important about how people engage with your work when they look at your pictures. Is another thing that I tested heavily on social media to see what the interactions would be like. And it's to do with whether your subject is looking at the camera or not. And the difference is staggering. People engage so much more with portraits that look at the camera. And when we look into someone's eyes, we feel like we're connecting with them. And that's absolutely what we want to do with a portrait. That doesn't mean that portraits can't work where someone looks off to the side, but they're generally not going to work as well as if they look at the camera. The second point is about when people look uncomfortable and nervous. There's nothing worse than trying to work with a photographer and complete their idea of what they want to create when you as a subject don't have a mental image in your mind of what that person's trying to create. Now, I've got 3 tips for you if your subject is nervous when you're doing a photo shoot with them. The first is to make sure that your subject really understands what you're trying to do. That means before the shoot, you should send them a mood board or a collection of your work, or it could be somebody else's work. It doesn't matter, but this should be the style of picture that you're trying to create. My second tip is to build in a phase of the photo shoot, which is a warm-up. Because even for me as a photographer, the first time I pick up the camera in the day, it takes me 15 to 20 minutes to get going and feel like I'm in the flow and I know what I'm doing. Which brings me on to point 3. The way to do that is to start with some seated poses. It's much easier for your model if they're sat down, because a lot of time people don't know what to do with their arms, they don't know how to stand. But when you're sitting down, that kind of takes care of itself because there's a lot more things that you can do. So start with the seated poses when you do a photo shoot. It's much easier for your subjects. They will warm up into the photo shoot and have a much easier time. My fourth tip is about the background you choose, and this makes a huge difference, and it's actually a question I get asked quite a lot. If I could have only one background, it would be a grey paper. You can easily colorize it into a range of different colors in your editing as well. Because grey is neutral, it holds color very easily, and it's so simple for me to turn the background to a blue. Like in this picture, this was not shot on blue paper, this was shot on grey, and it took no time at all to convert it to blue because I'm adding color to a neutral tone. My fifth tip for you is about color harmony. What color harmony will give you is a professional look. That's when people look at your work and they go, wow, that looks pro. Color harmony is the key to that. But I'm going to give you 2 simple color harmonies to start with. The first one is complementary color. So in this picture, you see the red and the green. Red and green sit opposite each other on the color wheel. It creates this color contrast. You feel the separation of a red top from that green background. That helps create that visual interest. This is very deliberate, and you'll see this across most of my work. So the way to create this is to look at what the model's wearing. And then when you go to your editing, you can color tone your background to be a complementary color. That will help create this more professional looking image. Here's another example for you. This is teal and orange. This is another classic complementary color scheme. And the second color scheme that I want to introduce to you, which is also relatively easy to create and work with, is the monochromatic color scheme. So monochromatic really means single color, one color throughout the picture. And if you look at the pictures that I'm showing you here, they're not technically monochromatic all the way through. They're not just one color. So what they are is monochromatic with muted tones. What that means is I'm allowing little bits of other colors to come through in the picture, but the picture is still essentially washed with one color tone. Monochromatic with muted tones is the way to get around what would just become a stained, washed image in a single color. And overall, that looks better because it's more like reality. If we just washed the entire picture one color, it would look a little bit odd. So far I've shown you how important the lighting is, the framing positions that we're using, the expressions, the backgrounds that we're using, and the color harmonies we're using. But throughout this, I think you've probably seen how important the editing as well. And the editing really brings it all together and makes the magic happen in your pictures. And if you want to see how I edit my pictures, check out the links in the description. Look at my studio editing workshop. My editing workshop will take your pictures to the next level and help your work look a lot more professional and engaging. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys again in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.